I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit, so they will produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned. But if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want and it will be granted. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. This brings great glory to my Father.
So you may have seen the promo video for the series that we're starting this morning. Several years ago, a mentor said to me the most important thing a leader can do is clarify for people what's important. And so every year there's lots of things that we try to do to clarify for all of us what's important about the church. One of the things that I've done now for a number of years is about this time every year, I carve out a few weeks from the preaching calendar, the preaching schedule, to talk about the church. Not the church in general, obviously, but our church, Waterville Community Church, to address questions like, well, who are we and what are we about? Like, what's important to us? What are we trying to do? How do we do what we do? And so that's what I'm going to start doing this morning. In years past, we've focused on things, some of which you heard this morning, right? Like our mission that we refer to as learning love. We talk about learning love because we believe that the God revealed in the person of Jesus Christ is a God who is love, meaning that mercy is God's essential nature. God is a God of unfailing love and faithfulness. Everything that God does is an expression of God's love for creation and for all of the people that God's created. That's who God is. And if you take the next step, because you are made, as a human being, you are made in the image of that God, what it means to be truly and fully human is to become someone who loves well. To live well is to love well. In fact, the mark of spiritual maturity, we would say here at Waterville Community Church, the mark of spiritual maturity is that you love well. When you hear Jesus talk about branches and vines and fruit, the fruit that he's talking about, right? That if you bear much fruit, you prove to be my disciples, and that's pleasing to my Father in heaven. The fruit that he's talking about is the fruit of love. That is the mark of spiritual maturity. That's the win or the goal to the spiritual journey. It is to become someone who loves the way that God loves, so that your life reflects the image of the God that created you. Okay, so we talk about learning love for that reason. We talk about learning that love, because to love God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength, and to love your neighbor the way that you love yourself, that is not something people come out of the womb ready and willing to do. It's not purely natural. You're equipped to do it. God creates you to do it, but doing it is supernatural. It's not something you're born able to do, but it is something you are born again able to do. You have to learn it. You have to develop into this kind of person. So again, the language that you heard this morning, Jesus talks about branches connected to vines that bear fruit. There's a spiritual arrangement. And if your life is organized in that way, if there's that kind of spiritual arrangement, the fruit of love becomes the byproduct. It isn't something that just happens, but it happens as a product of a particular way of organizing your life. You have to become someone who learns love. So we talk about love, we talk about learning love, and that's our goal here. That's our mission. We are learning from a God who is love how to live the way God creates us to live, which is fully expressed by lives that love well in this world. That's why we refer to ourselves as a learning institution or a vocational school or a training center. This is what's supposed to be true. It isn't always true, but what's supposed to be true is if you want to learn to love well, the church is the place you go. You can learn lots of other things from lots of other places, and there are other things that you will better learn in other places. But it's supposed to be true that if you want to grow up into a person who loves well, loves like Jesus does, this is the place you're supposed to come. because that's the business that we're in. So that's what we're trying to do here. Now, to be clear and candid, that is not the kind of growth or objective a lot of churches focus on. So I want you to think about you growing up in love, growing in Christian virtue, in character, becoming someone who can go out into the world and you can actually live in love the way that Jesus does, the way that God has loved you. Let's call that vertical growth. So just think ascent. You're becoming more like God. Let's call that vertical growth. The kind of growth that lots of churches focus primarily on is what I would call horizontal growth. And what I mean by horizontal growth is that the church, the organization, gets bigger. More people come to it. And that is not unimportant. The church is a missional community. We want to reach people. We hope more people come and are a part of us and a part of what we're trying to do in the world. That's not unimportant. But here's what typically happens. I've been a part of this. I have seen this happen, and I made a commitment a long time ago that we were not going to do this here. There's layers to church. Whenever you hear someone say the church, there's layers to that phrase. So by the church, have you ever thought about that? When we say we in the church, like who's the we? Am I the we? Are you the we? Are we the we together? Who's the we in the church? Because what often happens is there's a church that is the leadership. So it's people like me who are behind the scenes making decisions. And a lot of times what happens is the church, meaning the leaders, we bypass the church, meaning you all. We bypass you in order to make the church, meaning the institution, look more attractive to people outside the church. And sometimes the consequence of that process is people outside of the church come into the church so that the church gets bigger. It grows horizontally, right? Numerically, more people come. But it also means that the people inside the church didn't have to grow vertically. So have you ever taken an image on a computer screen and you want to resize it? You want to make it bigger, or you want to make it smaller? In order to keep the ratio and to keep it a clear image, you have to pull it at the corner so that it gets as tall as it gets wide. If you don't do that, if you just pull it at the sides, it just gets big and fat. And it just stretches out this way. And it gets really distorted. And a lot of times what happens in the church is the church, meaning leaders, we don't emphasize or require people in the church, that's not our focus, to help you grow vertically, to become more like Christ. We just bypass you, and we do our slick advertising, and we make our church look cool, and we spin it to people who are outside in the hopes that they'll come in. And so they do come in, and the church gets bigger this way, it gets wider, but it didn't get any taller. And what you end up with is a really distorted image of the church in culture. It's not what the church is supposed to be. The way it's supposed to work is that the church, meaning the institution, gets bigger. It gets wider. People come because the church, the people inside the church, are getting taller. They're growing vertically. They're becoming more like Christ, so that it is your life that is the sales pitch. It's your life that's the invitation. Not that we have a climbing wall in the lobby, or we've got these, state-of-the-art programs, or we've got this just incredible building, or all of the other superficial stuff that you can sell people on. But it's their interaction with you. It's them living with you and watching you live and watching you behave and seeing the way that you operate in the world that causes them to think, man, what has this person got that I don't have? They have a peace, they have a joy, they have a hope, they have meaning, they have purpose. There's something going on in that person's life that is super attractive. There must be something going on in that place. That's the way that it's supposed to work. So that the church grows horizontally, not despite you, but because of you. And the way that's supposed to happen is because the church, the leaders, structure our shared life together so that that's the focus. That as we all grow vertically, that is, we become more like Christ and we live well in this world, which is to say we love well in this world. Those outside the church and outside of faith look at our lives and go, I want to come be a part of you guys and to be a part of what you're doing. That's how it's supposed to work. So the purpose of a series like this is to clarify what's our structure. How are we trying to structure our shared life so that growing up in Christian virtue, becoming like Jesus, is the thing that's actually happening? That we, and this is, I am part of the we, that all of us would be able to look at our lives and say, because I was a part of Waterville Community Church, I am loving in this world in a way that I would not have and could not have a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. That's the idea. So the question is, what's the structure? How are we actually structuring our shared life so that's the outcome for everybody? So over the next 4 weeks, I'm going to give you one value. So the value is the thing that's important. It's what drives the behavior. Why do we do what we do? Well, it's because of this value. So I'm going to give you one value, and then I'm going to couple that one value with a practice, a program, an activity, a thing that I will look at you and say, guys, as best I can tell, and this is evidence in my own life, if you will just do this thing, if you will just do this thing faithfully over time, you are going to grow up in love. Okay, so our first value is to be with Jesus. Value number one is to be with Jesus. If what we are trying to do here is to imitate his way of life in the world, to learn from him how to live like him in the world, you have to learn it from him. That's how this works. Jesus was a rabbi. He called people to come and follow him, to come be with him, not because he was trying to transfer religious information. You can do that with a questionnaire. You can do that reading a book. His goal was not to transfer religious information so that you would know more religious stuff. His goal was that the people that he called to accompany him, to walk with him, over time would actually start to look like him and sound like him. Because that's what happens when you spend a lot of time with someone. We are mimetic creatures. We imitate. It's how we learn everything. Some of you wish that were not the case. This is how we learn. The people that you spend the most time with, you start to look and sound like. So if you want to live like Jesus, it's not just about learning things about him, it's learning from him. To learn from him, you have to be with him. For the disciples to pick up his way of life, they had to be with him every day. They literally had to observe, hey, what time does he go to bed? What time does he get up? What's the first thing he does when he wakes up? What does he eat for breakfast? What does he do in the afternoon? What does he read? What does he not read? Where does he go? Where does he not go? What does he seem to value? How does he react to people? How does he answer questions? You just are with him every day, every week, every month, every year, and just observing him, watching him operate, paying attention. And over time, his rhythms become your rhythms. His habits become your habits. His mind becomes your mind. You start to see the world the way that you observe him seeing the world. If you want to be with, or if you want to become like Jesus, you have to be with him. That's how you learn. You can think of it like learning a language. You can learn a language by sitting in a classroom and reading, learning nouns and grammar and verb conjugation. But that's not really how you learn a language. You got to start there because you got to learn the vocabulary. When I was in high school, I studied Spanish, but to this day, when I hear the Spanish word zapatos, my brain translates it into the English word shoes. That is, of course, not how native Spanish speakers think. They do not hear zapatos and think shoes. They hear zapatos and think zapatos. They're not doing any translating in that way. Their brains are literally coded differently. They see reality differently. The only way you learn a language like that is you immerse yourself in it. You have to live in it, where you're just hearing it all the time, every day. That's all you hear. And eventually it repatterns your brain so that you are thinking in that language. That's how you learn life from Jesus. It's not by learning things about him. It's by learning from him, living with him every day, every week, every month, every year, so that his way of life just becomes your way of life. And in some ways, you can think about this as the greatest commandment. If you are a regular churchgoer, if you have any experience in church, you know enough probably to know that Jesus said the greatest commandments are to love God, heart, mind, soul, and strength, and then to love your neighbor as yourself. Those are the greatest commandments. That's the spiritual life. That's the goal. That's the win, right? But if what Jesus is saying here is true, if love of God and love for people, if that's the fruit that you as the branch are supposed to bear, and that only happens if you remain in the vine, or to borrow Jesus' language, you remain in my love. Remain in my love is not a suggestion, it's a command. Jesus is saying you have to order your life this way if that's the outcome that you want. So if the greatest commandments are love God, heart, mind, soul, and strength, love your neighbor as yourself, but those are outcomes, they're products of a specifically ordered spiritual life, then they're not really the greatest commandments. The greatest commandment is really be with me. Be in me, be found in me, remain in me, because everything else is the outcome. If apart from Jesus you can do nothing, then being with Jesus is everything. So if our goal as a church is to see all people that are a part of our church be able to imitate the way of Jesus in the world, to live lives of love, then the most important value for us is you have to be with Jesus, because everything flows from that. So value one for us is be with Jesus. Now, there are lots of things that you can do in your personal life to be with Jesus. And at the risk of making you feel less adequate than you already do, because I know you live in a world, because I live in this world too, I know you live in a world that makes you feel inadequate all the time. You don't read enough, you're not patient enough, you're not kind enough, you don't work out enough, you're not a good enough parent, your kids aren't involved in enough activities, you're not up to speed on all of the current events, you really don't know how to think about that issue or this issue. I get it. That's the world you live in. The world I live in constantly makes me feel like I'm inadequate, like I'm not enough. So at the risk of adding to that, because I do not want to add to that, there are things that if you want to live like Jesus in this world, and you know that living like Jesus is a product of being with Jesus, then there are probably things that you ought to be doing in your personal life to be with Jesus. Just like it takes intention to be with anybody. You want to spend time with your spouse, you want to spend time with your kids, you want to spend time with your friends or your in-laws. In our world, like, you got to plan that stuff. You got to have some intentionality about that. The same is true with spending time with Jesus. And the things that you do in your life, right? Things that you do every day, every week, every month, every year, you already have a ton of practices that you engage in. And you engage in those practices because they add value to your life in different ways. They're probably all really good. You know, maybe you work out every day. Maybe you have tacos every Tuesday. Maybe you go on a date night every month. Maybe you take a vacation every year. But you have practices that rhythm your life, and you engage in those practices because they add value to you in some way. They are important to you. There are things you probably ought to be doing in your personal life to similarly rhythm and structure your life around being with Jesus. Things that you ought to do every day, every week, every month, every year, if becoming like Jesus is the thing that you want most in your life. And we could have a whole separate sermon and sermon series around whether you actually want that. Because I think if we're all being honest, we kind of say maybe we want that, but the truth of the matter is we really want a lot of other things. So if you want to become like Jesus in this world, which the church would say, that's the mark of humanity. It's what it means to be human, is to grow up in love. If you want that, you got to be with Jesus. But this series is not about what you can or ought to do personally. It's about what we do corporately. What do we try and do as an organization, as an institution, so that you all and me and us together, we can be with Jesus? If our primary value is to be with him, what's the practice? that if you just would engage in this practice over and over and over and over and over again, becoming more like Jesus is the thing that's going to happen in your life. And the answer is simple. It's what you're doing right now. It's our Sunday morning gathering. It's being here together. You know, most of you, we start our service every Sunday with what we call a call to worship. You probably didn't hear it because you were probably out in the lobby getting coffee or lemonade or whatever, and that's totally fine. That's cool. But the service begins every Sunday, and we say some things together. Before we start singing, we stand and we say things like, we are here because God exists and because God called us here. And we're not here to engage in religious programs that make us more well-rounded. We're not here to cope with the challenges of life, although that helps us with that. We're not here to learn cool religious stuff that we can bore people with at a party. We don't say any of those things. We're here to worship God and to be formed as God's people. If you want to learn love, the church is the place that you're supposed to go, because that's the business that we are supposed to be in, is helping you grow up into people of love. So another way to say that is we're just here to be with Jesus. That's the primary point of this. Us gathering together on a Sunday morning is about together putting ourselves at the feet of Jesus and trying to learn from him how to live in this world, how to be the people that he created us to be. And if you think about it, there is a real sense in which you can only be with Jesus when you are with other people. Now, I grew up in a tradition for many, many, many years that trained me to think that the most important thing I could do in my spiritual life or my spiritual development was spend personal, private time with God. Right? Go into a quiet room by myself, pray, read my Bible, and then come out, glowing like Moses, if you know that reference. And I am in no way discouraging that. God absolutely meets us in our private space, in the interior of our hearts. I pray and read the Bible every day. I would encourage every Christian to do the same. I'm in no way discouraging that. But I don't know of a time, we don't have a recording of Jesus looking at his disciples and saying, if you will go off by yourself and pray for hours on end, I will be with you. If you will spend hours in devotional reading of the Bible, I will be with you. What Jesus does say is when you gather with 2 or 3 other people in my name, I'll be there. And if I'm there with you, that means you're there with me. Spending time with Jesus in your own personal, private life is very important. But in our highly individualized culture, for a lot of us, any being with Jesus gets funneled through that rubric, through that filter almost exclusively. That's how it's done. There is a very real sense in which you can only be with Jesus when you are with other people. Jesus is among us, in us, working through us in ways that only happen when you're together. And I will tell you this, in the 25 plus years of me following Jesus, again, I still read and pray every day. I engage in personal practices all the time. Being here with you together, putting ourselves at the feet of Jesus and learning from him together, I don't know that there's a more important or more valuable practice in my life. And being here for the last 15 years has done every bit as much, if not more, shaping of my faith and of my life than any personal prayer time. So if our corporate value is to be with Jesus, in addition to, not to replace, not at the expense of, in addition to things that you might do in your own life, the practice here for us corporately is to just be here. Be here on a Sunday so that together we can put ourselves at the feet of Jesus and learn from him. You can think of it like a meal. I've often described it this way. A lot of church people, if you're new to church, if you don't have a lot of church background, churchy people sometimes refer to church in using food language. It's weird, but they say things like, I like this church because that's where I get fed. Or they say, I stopped going to that church because I wasn't getting fed. Okay? And in a real sense, this is okay language. Okay? One, you should figure out how to feed yourself at a certain point, right? But there's some truth to this. But I want you to think about this. I can mix myself up a protein shake in the morning. And I can, take it with me when I hop in my car to drive wherever I got to go. And in a very real sense, that nourishes me. It sustains me. It's good for me. But it is nothing like, and does not nourish me even remotely the same as spending time with my family together, making a meal, and then sitting and eating it together. Both nourish me physically, help to sustain my body, give me the nutrients that I need. But only one nourishes me in a holistic way, satisfies me in a kind of fully orbed human way. And when I look back and I think about my life growing up in a home, the days when I ran through the kitchen on my way to this practice or that practice, scooping something out of a crock pot and then eating it in my car while I was driving somewhere, I don't remember those days. Those did not impact me. But I have vivid memories of sitting at a kitchen table with my family and eating dinner. Those were the moments that shaped me. And in a very weird way, that's what church is supposed to be. Church is like a family meal. Yes, it nourishes you in much the same way a private protein shake would. But it also nourishes you in ways that a private time with God cannot. In all of the ways that you are human. Sometimes the church meal is life-changing. It's the greatest meal you've ever had. And some of you have had that experience. You've walked out of church going, I will never be the same person. I'll never be the same again because that just happened. It changes your life. Most weeks the church feels like meatloaf. There's just nothing cool about it. It's totally ordinary. There's nothing to write home. We had meatloaf. Right? But week after week after week after week, when you gather together with your family and you put yourself at the feet of Jesus, it shapes you. You become a different person. By centering your life personally and corporately on his life, his rhythms become your rhythms. His habits become your habits. His mind becomes your mind. So if what we want is for you to become more like Jesus, then our greatest value is you got to be with him. Not just learn about him, but learn from him. You got to be with him. And you can do things in your personal life to do that. But corporately, what we do as a church, at least as a leadership, we say, hey, why don't you just be here? Be here, be together, and together we'll be with Jesus here. Now listen, I know we're not all going to be at church every Sunday, right? Life is what it is. We're running in a million directions. We got all kinds of things that are important to us, and we got kids that are involved in stuff, and we want to go on trips, and I get it. I'm there too, right? I'm married. I got 3 kids. I got a life. I understand. And I never want anybody ever to walk out of our church feeling shamed into something. So I hope you know that heart and spirit in me. At the same time, having said that, I do want to challenge you. I want you to ask yourself the honest question, is becoming like Jesus the thing that I want most in my life? Or are there other things that are actually more important to me? Is becoming like Jesus the thing that I want most in my life? Because everything else that I care about, all of my other commitments, my commitment to myself, my commitment to my spouse, my commitment to my kids, my commitment to my job, to my community, to my country, to my enemies, whatever other commitments you have, if what Jesus is saying is true, all of those commitments are a downstream byproduct of your upstream commitment to him. So you have to ask yourself, is becoming like Jesus truly the thing that I want most in my life? If it is, or if you at least want it to be, then being with him ought to be the most important practice in your life. It ought to be the thing that takes priority for you. So the challenge is, because I know how our brains work, and we think this way. If it comes down to, I'm going to be at church on Sunday or I'm going to go do something else, most of us think, well, the church will always be there, and this is a season, and we got these things, and so I'm going to go do these things, and when these things are done, or when I'm done with this, then we'll go back. And I want you to imagine if every person in the church everywhere thought that way. There would be no church for you to come back to. So the challenge here is to think, instead of making the church have to make a case for why you should skip other things to be here, make everything else have to make a case for why you should skip church to be there. Instead of forcing the church to make a case for why you should skip other things to be here, you make everything else make a case for why you should skip church to be there. That's a shift in the way that you think about life. And it gets right to the heart of what is most important to you. If what's most important to you is becoming like Jesus, then the most important practice for you ought to be being with him. And in a very real sense, you can't be with him by yourself. You can really only be with him when you are with us, when you're together with other people. Now, I know that's hard, and I know immediately that is shame-inducing. I get it. So if I were going to ratchet that challenge up a bit, which I will now do, I would say, look, I know you can do this. I know you can. I know you can because I do. If there are 52 Sundays in a year, I'm here 47 of them. I usually take 2 Sundays off in the summer to go on a family vacation. I take 1 Sunday off to go with my friends on a ski trip in the winter. And there might be a couple other Sundays a year where we have something else. If there are 52 Sundays a year, I'm here 47 of them, whether I'm preaching or not. Which means 47 weeks a year, my wife and I have to get together, and we have to decide to be here and not be somewhere else. Now, of course, you're all thinking, well, but Mike, it's your job. You are right. It is my job. That is true. And what I'm going to tell you is that is one of the greatest gifts in my life. It is such a blessing that every single Sunday I don't have a choice. I have to be here because you pay me to be here, because you're expecting me to be here. So I have to be here. So when we have things as a family we want to do, when our kids want to get involved in activities, when we want to go somewhere, heck, it's just been a long week and we're tired, and it would be cool to just, stay in our pajamas and eat pancakes. Every single time those things come up, we have to say, no, we got to be there. And of all the things that have happened in my life in the last 15 years, the fact that I have to be here has been one of the greatest gifts and blessings in my life. It has done more to shape me and bless me and change me and grow my life because I didn't have a choice. You would be a healthier person if you didn't think you had a choice either. That's just the truth of it. If you thought of being here as your job, you would be a better you. Because being here with Jesus 47 weeks out of 52 is going to do more for your spiritual life to help you grow up in Christian character than being here 5 or 10 or 12. It just is. It's a volume game. You compound that over years and years and years. You know, one of my greatest fears, is I will be an angry old person. It's one of my greatest fears. I will be an angry old person. I will be a curmudgeon that's just pissed off about everything, and the kids are too loud, and they leave stuff out. It's one of my greatest fears. You know what I mean? I want to be that old person that you would be like, man, I wish that dude were my grandpa. You know what I'm saying? Kind and fun and full of life. You think that's just going to happen? You're just going to wake up 30 years from now and be that kind of person? No, you got to do something every single week of your life if you want to grow into that person. So if our greatest value, right, if what we're trying to accomplish is you grow up to be like Jesus, you got to be with Jesus. You got to learn from him. Corporately, you got to do that here. You got to do it together, which means you got to make being here a priority. You got to make everything else make the argument. You're not going to be every Sunday. I get it. And I don't want you to feel shame any more than I do. The fact that any of us feel shame means we're already thinking about it differently. We're already thinking about it wrongly. But if this isn't said of any other church, let it be said here. Let it be said here. That our primary goal is that all of us would grow up to be like Christ. That we recognize that to do that, we have to be with the one who we're trying to be like. And that is the primary purpose of us gathering together. And because that's what we want most, being here is what's most important to us. It drives all of your other commitments. Apart from him, you can do nothing. Being with him is everything. We're going to finish our service this morning by taking communion together. This is one of those practices you can only do if you're here. And the church has always taught something very real happens when we take communion together. It's shaping, it's forming. God, through God's Spirit, actually does something in you to change your life. In a minute, when you come forward to take bread that represents Jesus' broken body and juice that represents his shed blood, you're remembering. You're choosing to come here every week and have your life patterned by a narrative about a God who is full of love and faithfulness towards you. We're all being patterned by narratives all the time. You're choosing to have your life patterned by this one. But this is also an act of participation in a very real way. Being with Jesus, you are taking his body and his blood into your body and your blood. His life is becoming your life. Your life is in his life. That's happening in a very real, mystical way when you come together. If that is what you want, if it's what you at least aspire to, then come to the table. Everyone in this room is welcome. Nobody's kept away from coming to follow Jesus. If you want to live in Christ and grow up in love, then you want to be a part of the church. So you're in the right place. So come forward and be a part of the church. In just a minute, we'll invite you all to stand if you're able. We will dismiss for communion starting in the back row. So those of you sitting in the back, we just invite you to come down our center aisle. We will have communion distributors on both sides of our stage. They will say to you the body and blood of Christ. We just invite you to say amen. And then you will take from them a prepackaged communion cup that has a wafer and some juice in it. Just take that back to your seat using the side aisles, and then during this last song at your seat privately, you take that as you feel led. And then just a minute when this song is over, I'll come up and I'll close our service. If you want to follow Jesus, come to the table. You're in the right place, and you're welcome. So stand with me if you're able. Let me pray for us, and I invite you to come forward. God, we do recognize through your Son, Jesus Christ, that you are a God of love. That you have created us to be people of love, that's what it means to grow up and to be fully human in this world. We confess that we're not very good at it, that sometimes we don't care. But this morning, maybe we've had a moment of clarity that following you, becoming like you, is actually what's most important to us. It's what we want most. And I pray if that's true, that being with you would become the most important practice in our life. That being with you here together would become one of the most important practices of our lives. So that together, as we put ourselves at your feet, as we come forward, as we take the bread and the juice, that you keep shaping us into the people that you created us to be. We trust you to do that. We surrender ourselves to you this morning as you have so freely surrendered yourself to us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and keep me in your love to those around me. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you.